We are going to be reviewing the following cost center categories tonight: Article 1, regular instruction, and Article 5, student and support staff. And who will be leading this off? You?
Tonight features our Chief Administrative Officer, Bobby Avery, who is going to lead tonight's discussion and will be calling folks up that are experts in their field. Bobby's the expert tonight, so Bobby, the floor is yours.
Good evening. So I was thinking that we could first start out with our binders, our budget binders, and just review what's in this budget binder. So I'd like to have you open it up, and you can see the table of contents is here. The second page is the timeline, so this should keep you straight as far as what we're doing during each budget workshop. The next page is a definition of all of the budget articles. And then if we can skip to tab 1, that's the revenue budget. So we start right out with the revenue plan. Tab 2 is the article summary. And this evening's actually the next few workshops are going to be pretty much regurgitating this article summary on the slide deck, which then will hopefully prompt you to ask questions. The next tab is a object code summary, and so you'll notice that we operate in object codes, and so as an example, all teachers are found in one object code. All printing is found in one object code. All health insurance is in one object code. So that's how we operate in school finance. So what I've given to you are all of those object codes with the descriptors, and it really sums everything up for you. The next tab, in the interest of, and we are constantly improving the budget document process. This year we've added this worksheet. It's all new budget requests. And in the interest of being much more transparent and to make your job a lot easier, everything that's in the budget that's new is sitting right here. And I broke it out based on summer school versus regular instruction versus special education, on and on. Tab 5 is the ED 279, so this is our funding formula. Tab 6 is our enrollment and projected enrollment. Tab 7, these are all of our special revenue funds. Alicia, you had asked for all the grants. Here they are right here. Tab 8 is our adult education budget, revenue and expenditures. Tab 9, these are all the slides. So like last year we didn't give them to you ahead of time. This year we worked really hard to make sure you had them ahead of time. So these are all the slides you'll see during the budget workshops. And then in the alphabetical order tabs, these are all of the really great executive summaries that all of our building admin and directors wrote. That will help inform their budget requests. So tonight we're going to be working out of tab 2, which is the article summary. And as a reminder, when we met in our budget workshop on that Saturday, we had determined that to review this budget, we would do it based on articles. And so as Todd had mentioned, tonight is Article 1 and Article 5. So before we start that, we're going to review the FY21 budget goals. And as you remember from Todd's presentation Monday night, every budget request that you'll see on that new worksheet ties out to one of these goals. And so we made cards, we laminated cards. Did admin get these too? Yeah, let's get them to them. And this is just to help remind us to keep it's kind of like our true north. So goal number 1 is to provide meaningful, intentional, and sustainable professional development. Goal number 2 is address equity in the opportunity gap. Goal number 3 is to provide improved instruction through social and emotional learning and a multi-tiered system of support that is universal across LPS. All right, so now we're going to move into Article 1, which is regular instruction. Thank you. Regular instruction is made up of 4 different components. The first component is elementary instruction. The second is secondary instruction. The third is English language learners. And the fourth is gifted and talented. So in Article 1, the cost drivers are this. The overall increase is $849,538, or a 2.95% increase. Elementary, so we're going to break that down for you. The elementary component the cost drivers are contractual, which means salary and benefits. We've got our promise contract in there. Those are all items in which we do not have control over. Then, for new items that we've added to this under the elementary, we've added a half-time athletic director at LMS. We've added expeditionary learning supplies at LMS, and we've added technology equipment. Now, do you want like Dave and Janet to talk to this now, or do you want to wait until after we go through all of this? Okay. Okay. For the secondary component, the cost drivers are contractual increases. We also have in there our Chromebook insurance program, which is a 4-year cycle. It's due. The science laptop cart and Edgenuity licenses. For English language learners, we actually have a reduction in ELL, and it's due to a reclassification of 2 employees. And so we, as we've discussed many times before, we're really committed to ensuring that proper coding is occurring for all of our staff. And as we find places in which we need to improve upon that, we do that, and we're doing that this year with ELL, moving 2 employees out of ELL who really should be in a different article. And then gifted and talented is contractual increases only. That's the end of regular instruction.
The questions will be coming from this side tonight. So the 2 questions that came up very quickly, could Lewiston Middle School, the halftime athletic director, could you describe what the current setup is? Is Jana here? She's hiding.
Good evening. I've met everyone. I want to introduce Chris Roy. He's a math teacher at the middle school and also our current athletic director. The current position is a stipend position. There's a little bit of a history of what that position is, but long story short, he's underpaid on a stipend right now. For the actual logistical pieces, and then there's another smaller stipend that goes to another staff member for like game day management, someone to be there to supervise. So
In adding this position, would both of those stipends be eliminated from? Okay, correct. Great. Thank you so much.
Any questions for these folks that are standing here, middle school or about the athletic director?
Miss Avery, where are the 2 admins who were actively in ELL being moved to?
One is being moved to the middle school, and the other one is being moved to Montello, and that's Article 7. We're going to move on to Article 5. Where is that slideshow? Okay. So Article 5 is student and staff support, and that consists of multiple components such as guidance and counseling services, health services, student support, improvement of instruction, professional development, and libraries and media services. The overall increase for Article 5 is $870,907, or a 15.6% increase. The cost drivers, and we'll break them down, for guidance and counseling services, that really is benefit election changes, and if you look in your on your article summary, you'll notice that that's a decrease. It's because there were changes, election changes. Same with health services. Student support for school resource, and that's school resource officers, and there's some graduation, LHS graduation costs in there, all contractual. That's all for our SROs. The improvement of instruction, the reclass of 2 positions. This has to do with our pre-K coordinator and our homeless liaison. One of them was actually charged to a grant that's been reclassed into the general fund. And then our homeless liaison, and I don't know the history as to why we reclassed that position, but it's been a reclass. So it's really just moving monies around from one article to another. It's not adding. The professional development, I'm going to save for Superintendent Finn. He's going to do that after. And then the libraries and media services is really about benefit election changes. So I'm going to have Karen actually address that.
So actually, the position currently in the current budget is in the Connors school budget, and the previous year it was in the pre-K expansion grant that we had with the state. So we moved it last year into the general fund, but it stayed in the Longley school pre-K budget, and this person is now serving in a district capacity. So we need to move it into so that it's a district, not in one school. Does that make sense?
If I can add to that, that is right in alignment with our coding and proper coding.
In terms of the school resource officers, can you remind us how are they split with the city and how many do we have in that capacity?
This year we have 4, and it's split 75-25. We pay 75%, the city pays 25%.
And I assume benefits are prorated at that. Okay.
Thank you, Bobby. So we talked the other night, or I guess I talked the other night about the need for professional development, and I think it's important to draw ourselves back to our note card there with our goals on it, and providing meaningful, intentional, and sustainable professional development. What I'd like to discuss with our committee tonight is exactly what that plan looks like, and to draw us back to making sure that it's meaningful, that it's intentional and sustainable, to help us address those barriers that we were talking about. Our district focus for this upcoming school year is obviously the investment we've already made in social and emotional learning, and tying that back to the data that lets us know that it is an area we should be focusing on. I'll talk tonight a little bit about multi-tiered systems of support. The acronym on that is MTSS, and I'll go a little deeper into that this evening to inform the school committee exactly how that will improve our instruction, not only for regular education, but also in special education too, and how that should and will have a budgetary impact in future years. And finally, the skillful observation and feedback for developing teachers and teaching. Those are two different things, teachers and teaching. And this is a training that I highly recommend only because I've been through it before. And it, from a principal perspective, it may be from a good principal to, well, the guy that you guys hired. And this is the type of training that I would love to see our principals have access to, because it develops teachers, it develops morale, and at the end of the day, it keeps our folks here where they belong, here in Lewiston, because we talked about it being a non-threatening, non-evaluative way of giving feedback and coaching. So I'll begin. So we know that social and emotional learning, we'll start with that. It's going to be our district-wide focus next year. We talked about the 5 research-based domains identified by the Collaborative of Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. Those are the worldwide leaders. They were part of my first dissertation effort. And as I learned more about that, I thought, if I ever get my own school system, this is what we'll have to do. And a couple years later, you posted this job. We know that we have a social and emotional learning coordinator that we are so lucky that you allowed us to bring on this year. But this coordinator, Aisha Hall, who you met the other night, will facilitate training for building leadership. I'm challenging my principals to lead the instruction in their buildings. And I know that we'll be able to create the conditions for our building principals so that they can actually do that. So you might call that a train the trainer model. Far be it from us to be able to put 6,000 people in a room and have Aisha train them all. However, our principals are very, very good leaders, and they're going to learn the SEL curriculum, if you will, from Aisha and be able to implement that in their buildings as part of the Wednesday series of professional development. As it currently is, my assessment of that is that we can do a lot better. We know that one of our Wednesdays for next year will be more for a faculty meeting setting. We need those. Talk about what went on last month, talk about what's going on this month, highlight some great things that happened, and open it up for discussion. So there's two-way dialogue between our staff and our administration, and that builds a healthy climate. We know that our second Wednesday, we really want dedicated to true professional learning communities. Those are PLCs, so there's another acronym for you, but a professional learning community might be kind of what we are. It's a smaller group that's data-focused and student-driven. And so in Lewiston, we call a lot of things PLCs, and everything that we call PLCs actually is not a PLC. But there's a lot of that goes around this country. We want to make sure that we actually have small groups that, believe it or not, are not admin-led. Those are teacher-led groups. In previous districts that I was privileged to work in, those might look like classrooms with 4 or 5 teachers in there, and they've got a common maybe book that they've been reading. They've got data that they're talking about, but the PLCs take on their own little personalities as well. And as a principal or assistant principal just pops in, you start getting a real feel for where folks are. And it's normally, it will obviously be centered around social and emotional learning. And the final Wednesday, that's the one where we let our kiddos go home early on Wednesday. That's when the principals will have their teachers, all their staff members together to design the SEL training that they've been trained on for essentially the month by Aisha. And now they get to design some meaningful instruction, not sitting there with our principals, with our teachers all day long for a few hours, but really modeling what it is that we'd like to see in our classrooms. So we want to see about 20 minutes of direct instruction. Then we want to see breakout. We want to see use of technology. We want to see folks collaborating and having that aha moment, and then excited to come back together and share this out with the entire group. That, to me, is a pretty solid Wednesday. And what we would like to see is that central theme of social and emotional learning building out over the course of the first 5 months of school. Folks are not going to be writing dissertations on this. However, they can be utilizing the skills and the strategies in their classroom to help foster those 5 domains that we talked about. So those 5 domains, the very first one being self-awareness, and the second domain being self-management. I'm aware, how do I manage that? And then building the relationships that you need to help support you, and then making responsible decisions that sometimes we all struggle with. And then finally, your social awareness. How do I apply this out there? Is this okay? Is this not okay? And those 5 different domains can take place in every lesson that you teach, as long as it's rolled out consistently district-wide. And so it may be that in September, let's really focus on this self-awareness. How can we take self-awareness and put that into our word problems or our problem solving in science or on our social studies for sure. And it's common across the district so that now we can build on that for the month of October. And that month of October might be, okay, now that we're self-aware, how do we manage that? What do we do? What are our resources? In the younger grade levels, it may be something as simple as having what we would call the dovetails. We have necklaces around our neck and we kind of know, okay, if I'm feeling this way, here's what I do. And as elementary as that sounds, that's the way to start. I mean, all of us probably could use some dovetails around our neck sometimes, can't we? And it looks a lot different even for a high school senior. Okay, I'm feeling a certain kind of way. These are my resources, and here's how I react to that. But we'll see as we track this data, because I think that everyone here knows that we're really big on tracking data, is we should see a decrease in some of those disciplinary items that led to 1,009 suspensions up to this point right now. Keeping our kids in school, and for the most part, let's not forget, teaching our teachers this too, because our teachers need this as well. We want to really make sure that we're taking care of, for lack of a better phrase, the mental health of our teachers too. It can be really frustrating when you're a top-notch English language arts teacher, and yet you've not been taught the skill of how to make a child socially aware that that's probably not okay to do. This training will focus on that. At the end of the day, it links back to our data that does suggest that we need to do a whole lot more work and a better job around social emotional learning. So that would be a major focus for us, and the district's been made aware that we're not going to have 18 different types of PD going on. We're going to really streamline this and get really good at doing a few things, and each year we'll get better at doing a few more things. The great thing about SCL is that it's extremely interesting, and as we know, based on our climate survey that our 400 staff members took, 95% said that this is something that they really want to get better at. So that's a no-brainer for us. Monique?
So how, you talk about principals a lot, but what about directors and folks at Dingley who are also responsible for coaching folks in different ways?
Absolutely. So I should really say principals and directors. Right now, and that's a great catch. I thank you for that. So right now, what we do is every other Tuesday, we've got what we call our leadership and innovative team meetings. They're pretty awesome. They're not your typical meeting of principals and directors, but we are all together, and it's segmented out. So folks get the information that they're supposed to have for the next couple of weeks, similar to what we would do in faculty meetings. And then there's usually some very specific topics that we want to cover. Last time it might have been budget. For next year, we want to segment training time in there so that Aisha, our phenomenal SEL coordinator, can work with us on this. And us, that means, well, us, everyone that's here right now too, because you're right, these are things that we need to make part of our vernacular, part of our vocabulary. So when we talk about I saw you doing something great in terms of self-management. Good call, good move on that. These are things that should be common across the entire district and things that we should celebrate too. So that's a great question. So I should really emphasize principals and directors. So this. Oh no, I'm good on that. Yeah.
Okay.
Bobby memorized this whole thing. Yeah. So the multi-tiered systems of support. This is a passion of mine. And it's a passion of mine now as a superintendent for a much different reason. I said before that the hardest part of this job I should write a book on the first year as a superintendent, but the hardest part is this work right here. Because as a principal, you only see it, you're privileged to what's going on in your school. When you've got 7 different schools or 70 different schools, there are so many more factors in play, and you've got a school committee that you're working with now, and you can't just be that hard-charging principal like I used to be that would just run through a wall and just get it done. It doesn't work. You'll burn out very quickly doing that, or you'll get run out, right? So there's things that we have to do. When it comes to multi-tiered systems of support, this is something that I've recognized in our district will have a deep impact on this book, on this budget book here in the coming years. Multi-tiered systems of support is not special education. And yet, when we employ the multi-tiered systems of support, it will have a huge impact on special education. So let's talk about that. We'd like to introduce a framework for targeted support for struggling students. And a struggling student is this. Ready for this? A struggling student is, I don't get it. Okay. Don't get it. So what is it that we can do for that kid that says, I don't get it? And so that may be what you would consider to be tier one. Now, typically in your typical school system, in your typical classroom, you may see, let's picture an inverted pyramid here, an inverted pyramid, and 80% of the kids, they might get that on the first try. 20%, I don't get it. And so, okay, let's focus on that. What are the things that we can do so that we can get that skill? About 5% are going to say, I still don't get it. And so, okay, we still don't get it. Now we got to move into more, well, maybe more of an intensive, focused way to allow them to catch up so they can get this. I'm just going to call it like it is. I'm not being critical. Our system has been doing this for quite a long time. We're jumping from tier one right into replacement curriculum. And because our MTSS is not in place to my satisfaction, at least. So as a district leader, I can say it's not to my satisfaction. What we want to see is more of a problem-solving process. And so as we build that out, you may see something along the lines of data studies. You may see something along the lines of what we call instructional rounds, similar to what you would see doctors talking about in a hospital as they're talking about a patient. We're going to do our rounds. And we should be talking about our students that I'm still not getting it. Okay, well, what are you doing? What have you done with your students? We've got to be able to have these discussions around data. Now, when it gets to the point where we have to do what we call a child study, we have to train on this, but a child study might be, okay, we're getting the whole team together. Let's talk about the interventions that we've tried and the interventions that haven't worked, and what do we have left? There's a whole process to train on. What does a child study look like? And then the next level of this would be what we call an ACT, which is Assistance for Children and Teachers. And of course, the parents are all involved in this as well. So it's a problem-solving process. It's very data-driven. Communication and collaboration are huge. Capacity building infrastructure, and of course, leadership. Bobby, can I get the next slide so I can go deeper on this? So what problems will MTSS training address? Well, we know what we're lacking in Lewiston Public Schools is a guaranteed viable and effective classroom instruction. And that's instruction for everyone, whether they get it or not. Differentiated instruction in the classroom. So when you know that those 6 kids all said we didn't get this, what can we do to get them together so that we can work with them? It's training our teachers to be able to address these issues in their classroom so that the whole entire class and the individuals can move forward. We know data-driven decision-making through the instructional rounds that we talked about, the child studies, the assistance for children and teachers, and of course involving parents in the conversations as well, before it even gets to an IEP. We know valid research-based interventions in the classroom. So we know that these are all based on research. So I know that if these students don't get this decoding, this is what I'm going to see if we can, rather than refer them to someone else to figure that out. Intensive targeted interventions for addressing what we call lagging skills. Let's talk about what a lagging skill is. A lagging skill, it's something I just didn't get. I'm behind on it could be spelling, it could be multiplication, but a lagging skill doesn't necessarily mean that we have a disability. So we have to really think about when we assign replacement curriculum, what we're saying is that there's a disability here. And oftentimes, and it's not just in Lewiston, oftentimes we catch that lagging skills get mistaken for disabilities. And then we end up going down the road of IEPs maybe a little bit too soon. And that has a huge implication, not only on our special education students that really need that, but also our regular education students that just needed some help with the lagging skill. And then the reason why we're here tonight is it has a huge implication on our budget. When we talk about Article 2, we'll talk more about that. We know that this is the means of problem solving before we refer to special education. Our special education directors and teachers work incredibly hard. I've been privileged in the last couple of weeks to sit in on some IEP meetings. They go by the book, really do. What I can tell you is that the workload is absolutely incredible. I've also been in classrooms, and in the classrooms I can tell you that if we had training in multi-tiered systems of support, and we had model schools that we could look at, model districts that we could look at that have figured this out a long time ago, we could really help lighten the load of lagging skills, address that in the classroom, and allow the students who truly need to be moved forward, because we might have to consider a replacement curriculum, for our directors and for our teachers to really focus on them. Bobby? The third piece of professional development, and this is the one that I want to share this with all of our teachers and all of our principals. Looking back on my career, I didn't realize when I was going through it at the time, but I was brought up by some of the very, very best. Some folks that pushed me very, very hard. Folks that sent me home as an assistant principal to go put a tie on, even though it was a basketball game. And folks that held me to very high standards. One of the highest standards I was held to was by a gentleman named Dr. Tim Markley, superintendent in New Hanover County Schools in North Carolina. And he made us go through a pretty intensive training called skillful observation and feedback. The gentleman who essentially owns this, his name is Mike Rutherford. Mike's absolutely incredible, but he's all about business. He believes in building leaders have these 7 tools for developing teachers and teaching through growth, evoking, non-evaluative feedback, and coaching as instructional leaders in their schools. These 7 tools you have to be incredibly good at, or you can't move on to the next one. The training is pretty intensive. It takes place over full days of training for our principals, and there's homework to do. There's a lot of homework to do. When we talk about 30-second feedback, 30-second feedback. Miss Ray, I want to thank you for letting me come into your classroom today. So good to get out of the office sometime. I'd love to see great teaching. You know, I noticed today as you knelt down next to that child that was struggling, that you employed something that we call neural downshifting. So neural downshifting is when we take kind of the emotional piece out of that frustration and focus on what this kid did really well, and you got him caught right back up. That's fantastic. I want to let you know that was a great move, and I hope that maybe you'll share that with your neighbor down the hallway. Boom, 30 seconds. Called it what it was. There's 22 of those things that are just, that you should just know. And the thing is that that's a 30-second feedback that makes the teacher say, wow, you called something what it was. It's better than good job. Or here's a sticky note. There's science behind this. And that's just 30-second feedback. A 5-minute feedback, that's a sit down. 30-minute feedback, that's having real conversations about, listen, I'm seeing things now, but would you consider this? I'll share with you what Mike gave me. We had to literally draw their classrooms out and show them that we drew their classroom and talk about the instructional practices, the student work, the environmental cues. You have to know what you're talking about before you do that, because the teachers will know. They'll look right through you and say, you don't know what you're talking about. I'll tell you, when we're going over these skills like craft conversation, key lesson planning, talent development coaching, next level coaching, team coaching, and teaching studies, as our principals go through this, they have to practice on each other in front of their peers. And Mike's going to cut you off and just say, We go into actual classrooms. So we would go into Jess Philippon's classroom, one of my favorite classrooms in the entire district, and just let Jess teach. And our folks would watch, and they'd watch, and they'd watch, and then it pulls us back out, brings us to that library. What did you see? And what it does is it calibrates, so that we all know what we saw, and we all know, okay, that's what that's called, and we celebrate that along the way. All that being said, this is the type of building leader that I would like to see, because what does it do? It requires you to be in the classrooms for about 3 hours a day. Now, if Lewiston Public School could take the principals that we have and allow them to be in the classrooms, trained on what actually to look for, interventions, feedback, and follow through, it ups our teachers' game, and that only helps our kids when all said and done. Early on, when I got here for my entry plan, I think I got 2 out of the 3 things wrong. But one thing I got right was we really want to work on building the skill level of our principals so they can actually be instructional leaders. They are smart. They are hardworking. I think that they're hardworking, oftentimes doing the wrong work. We're going to work with our principals on creating that time for themselves so they can actually be next level principals to help us get some next level teaching out of our teachers. In turn, what you will see, what we saw at least in New Hanover County and again in Atlanta, was our teachers were motivated to, well, they want more. I want more of that. And then we saw our teachers with master's degrees start creep up year after year after year because they wanted to know more about this. So that would be the third piece. So what problems will skillful observation and feedback address? Improvement of instructional quality through developing teachers' skills, techniques, and approaches to teaching. When you talk to our principals, if they could actually do that today, they would have loved to do that. We've got to train our folks on how to do this. Recognition of relevant patterns of cause and effect that support effective instruction and significant learning. That's all part of the feedback. You've got to be able to say, I saw this and here's what happened. If you did this, this might happen. Retrieval fluency of 23 themes of effective teaching. And I'll tell you, I still have my memory jogger. There's our memory jogger there. So even if you kind of forgot one, you're like, what was that? So you take a peek down and you say, oh, performance feedback. And it's really important that you can name that for your teachers and give something for them to research too, to say, wow, I did very well with that. This is something that I can work on. Most importantly, development of the ability of the instructional leader to provide teachers with frequent, meaningful, growth-evoking feedback and coaching that teachers see as timely, specific, valuable, and non-threatening. If when a principal comes in your classroom and say, wow, I needed that. Whether it was positive or maybe not, I still needed that. It was very specific. Good job is awesome the first time through. I don't want good job. I don't want your sticky note. I want to know exactly what I did well and what I need to work on. I have one of our principals that came in. She knew she was going to get a stellar evaluation in January. And she sat down and she said, no, I want you to push me. So I said, well, I'm going to push you. I'm going to say some great stuff. I'm going to also say some things too that I need you to work on as well. But I love that attitude. The teachers want. They want push me too, but push me in a way that's not threatening so I really can get better. Obviously valuable. If there's value in 30 seconds in interaction with your principal, that's 30 more seconds than most folks get. But what about when you get yourself to that point where I just want to talk to you for a half an hour? We're going to schedule some time. I'm going to carve that out for you. We're going to talk about this craft. You are going to be an artisan teacher. This is your thing. This is what you do. It's not just your job. It's your craft. And you create this love for teaching that goes far beyond even where we are right now. I would not even suggest this training. This is very dear to me. I would not suggest this training for our teachers. They're getting ready to meet Mike Rutherford. He'll be up here on March 24th. And Mike's going to actually come up and say, all right, this is what it's going to be like. Are you on board for this or not? And obviously, if this is something that we can find in our budget to do, we can create instructional leaders that can create artisan teachers that will create lifelong learners in these kids. So here's the review. We want to develop hearts, minds, and skills. You saw the data already, but we know that social emotional learning, a multi-tiered systems of support approach in our regular classrooms as well, and skillful observation and feedback for developing teachers and teaching will develop hearts, minds, and skills. If there are any questions regarding professional development, I can answer them at this time.
I have two questions. So on the multi-tiered systems of support, is that designed in plain language to reduce rates of unnecessary special ed classification?
It's designed to improve overall classroom instruction. A byproduct of that might be that 5% that we may have to refer on for true replacement curriculum, that's what we should be working with. At this point in time now, let me take that, Karen, I'm borrowing this from you now. Let me take that pyramid, that 80, 15, 5, and I'm going to flip it for you. And our data shows that that's what we're doing right now. 5% are saying, I got this. 15 and a good 80 are being referred or being considered for that. We need to really shift our practice so we can shift it the other way. But the end game for MTSS is actually not just to, and you didn't even imply this, but not just to reduce special ed numbers, it's to improve our instructional practices so that the students in need get what they need most. I should have said this earlier, but I would highly encourage folks to research Natick Public Schools in Massachusetts. Natick Public Schools is a role model school system for us. Natick has an assistant superintendent there who is more than willing to work with us, but also allow us to see the school that he built before he got promoted. He had an inner city school that was across the street from a private school. And within 3 years of his implementation of the MTSS, then this will be the dude that's going to be teaching our folks. And the gentleman who will be allowing us to go into their schools, that school saw a significant reduction in special ed referrals, but a huge increase in students that were doing very, very well that previously weren't. And they were, well, I'm a data guy. They were beating the bricks off the private school across the street, which was just really kind of neat to see. That's not what we're shooting for here, but what we are shooting for is improved in-classroom instruction so that the students who truly need a replacement curriculum are the ones being referred for that.
Yeah, I think it's really exciting to potentially be able to, for lack of a better word, diagnose what students need in terms of instruction, and not give them, more than they need, not overtax folks who are dedicated to helping the students who need the most help, and that's really exciting. I also wanted to ask about the third piece, just specifically in terms of the how much time are principals spending in classrooms now, and if it's less than the 3 hours of observation and feedback, what are they doing with that time that potentially they wouldn't be doing under a different system?
So I'll qualify what I'm saying by saying this, is that our principals, phenomenal people. They're smart. I've grown quite fond of every single one of them in their own way. They're folks that I would have loved to have been a principal with. They're a fun group. They're a very competent group. But our principals are working incredibly hard at building management because they have to. So if we look at that 1,009 suspensions, our principals had a big part of having to deal with that. And what about the ones that didn't get to suspension, but maybe got something else? From a behavior management perspective, our principals had to take what they got into this for, which was to be instructional leaders, and put that on a shelf and set that aside for a while until it just became the norm. It just became their life. My predecessor was a phenomenal business person. I will never know what he knew. I'd like to think that as an instructional leader myself, coming from the education world, I can really relate to these principals and say, man, and I keep saying to them, if you only knew what this job can really be. And so it looks like this, Mr. Collins. Our assistant principals need to be your building managers and your building leaders. We manage things, we lead people. And our instructional leaders should be the authorities in instruction in your school. The ones that you're like, hey, listen, Todd, let me talk to you real quick. What do I do about this? We're stuck on this, and I might say, I'd try this. Maybe I don't know it, but I know someone who does. You become that authority. Our principals right now are at the point where they're doing a lot of assistant principal work because the assistant principals need help managing the building because our SCL is not in place where it needs to be. You can see how this all scaffolds off each other. When I have a pie chart downstairs in the office, you've probably seen it, and it says the ideal principal's day should be this chunk, which is basically half of that circle, in classrooms giving meaningful feedback to your teachers so that they can do something with it. That's how we get better, right? The other half, we still have some management to do. We have some parents that we definitely need to be in touch with. We've got some communication we have to deal with as well. There should be probably some sit-down formal conversations with your supervisors as well. And then obviously take some time for your APs to teach them a little bit of something too. So as I look at our high school, he's got a heck of a team over there at that high school. My advice has been and will be, and Jake's on board for it too, is let's really start identifying what the role of the assistant principal is and let them do that, grow them in that. When I was coming up as a principal, I was allowed to have testing 1 year, and I got really, really good at data. I got the buses and the books 1 year. I got special education 1 year. And I finally, when you really get good, you get curriculum. And that's when you know that you've made it, when you got magnets on a wall in your office and you're the top dog there. But you had to learn everything. And then I got my opportunity as a principal, and I could look back and say, and I did all these things. But I do remember Dr. Robinson always in those classrooms, and he expected that I was going to stay until after he left to make sure that things were done. Our principals deserve that same type of training and support. But right now, it all comes back to that SEL piece. When we get that right, they'll actually have time to say, oh my gosh, I can get in the classroom today. Or when I get a text from a principal saying, I'm so excited, I got 6 classrooms today. I'm like, wow, that's pretty awesome. The day's going to come where they're in 26 classrooms. Because that's what we really should be doing. So it's not to the fault of our building leaders. It's actually, it's on me now. This is, again, I'm us now. It's on me now to convince our school committee that with true professional development, we can actually improve instruction in our buildings.
Hang on.
Oh, sure.
Just to make sure if anybody, is this like a follow-up would it be
just
weird
one
to?
no,
Okay.
I'll just quickly.
Okay.
This isn't a question. I just think it's so exciting how these things, relate to each other, and this is phenomenal. I'm really excited.
That's right. Two questions. The first is there a state mandated evaluation of teachers? Is that a thing? And how does that factor into skillful observation and feedback then?
That's a great question. Yes, our teachers are on evaluative tracks. So this might be a year where you get your evaluation. The evaluation, in theory, is supposed to improve your teaching. Some folks might see that as a way to get teachers often not just along the continuum, but maybe off the continuum. There's a negative connotation that shouldn't come along, but the reality is, let's face it, it does. Folks get nervous when they're being evaluated, but not when you're being skillfully observed. The culture really has to shift. And it's not like, I'll tell you what, I mean, I've got all these books from Mike. I can't just give them out to our principals. Hey, just do this. You got to be trained on how to walk in and kind of just give that nod or just sit down and give them that wave. And I'm not even sitting here with stuff to write down. I just want to see you. And I'll tell you what, I'm so good, I don't need that memory jog. Let me pull you out. Let me tell you something that I saw. That's the observation and that skillful feedback. Because if we're just going off evaluation, I might officially see you twice, right? Maybe I'll see you in November. Maybe I'll see you in March. And then you sign your evaluation at the end of the year. And of course, it's all electronic and there's a lot of numbers. What's interesting is that our principals have become more accountants than they have become instructional leaders, and that's a shame. But again, it's a product of this system that is box checking. It doesn't mean our principals aren't good, they're phenomenal. They just have not had the opportunity to pick up skill where they can just literally just walk in and sit down, spend some time in your classroom and give you some feedback and know what they're talking about too. Don't just throw something out there and know what they're talking about. What I found was surprising was the teachers started talking about, did they come in your classroom today? And they started getting mad if I didn't go in a certain classroom. So you got to go in the classrooms that you're not worried about too. You got to give that feedback because they want that as well. When all's said and done, it does build a very positive climate. Do you remember that number that we saw yesterday? Monday, 177 folks left. As I did the extra interviews, nobody mentioned money. We talked about this before, but we talked about direction and support. The support was, I just want to know what to do better, or I need to know what I'm doing well. Sometimes I just need that someone to come in and have that 30 seconds, that 5 minutes. But this keeps great teachers in our district. And again, from a financial standpoint, when we're able to say, most of our teachers have been here 7 years, we're not constantly retraining teachers and doing this all over again. We're no longer the farm system for the haves. We become the haves. What's interesting is that Lewiston teachers can go to any district in Maine. I've never heard of one not succeeding, but it doesn't work the other way. You can't always come to Lewiston from someplace else, and you might have been a rock star there, maybe not so much here. Our folks, their talent is very transferable, but you have to be special to work here and stay here. We want to keep ours here as well. And so although this is very, very honest feedback, it's a much more positive way, and we've got to train our folks to do that. Long-term wise, I can go on New Hanover's website right now and still see teachers that were there in 2013 when I left. And I thought, wow, I had a piece of that at least. Hopefully I did. Knowing our teachers, knowing our principals, they have what it takes. Otherwise, I wouldn't even ask for it because it's really, really hard. It's not easy and it's not even really fun. But it's a skill that you pick up and you realize that you just became an elite leader. And I think that our kids and our teachers deserve that.
Okay. And I am guessing, I don't think any are in the general fund budget. I think they're all in Title I or maybe some other funds. Instructional coaches factor into this? Sorry, I stole it. And are they doing this training as well? And is there a plan there? Because it sounds like you might be rethinking.
Yeah, absolutely. So we know right now that if we are able to get this as a priority through our budget, that we get Mike and we get Mike's training. And we've got our 7 principals. But I'd be able to get our assistant principals and our instructional coaches the same training. Listen, we got them all day. We've got some space here. I've been in auditoriums full with Mike, and I've been in small libraries with Mike in that district in Carolina. And so as we look at this, we want to make sure that all of our folks know the fundamentals on this. Because this really is about coaching when all said and done. We talked about coaching and coaching on this. So I would imagine we'd probably be right here in this room, and we'd probably have a room full of folks that would do this training together. Lots of breakout sessions, lots of time to make a mistake in front of your peers. And believe it or not, it's okay. It's okay to say, wow, I got that wrong. And Michael just tell you that too. Honestly, I'm really looking forward to it because I want to go back through it again too. I think I've maybe forgotten more than, than I should have at that point in time. It'll help me a lot too, our building leaders. But we'd have room for all of our coaches to get coached.
So would I ask about coaches on a different night with a different article to talk about? I just want to know if there's going to be changes in that structure as part of this. It is tonight that we talk about that. So what's happening with the coaching model? We talk about this every year, and there's always lots of questions from people emailing me about this a lot. So with all of this professional development, with coaching from leadership, does that change the model of what we're doing?
It does. And so there'll be a future budget year where we talk about these things called ARTs. You're not going to see it this year. We'd like to shift towards an academic response team. Boston Public Schools. Bobby researched this for me, so then I checked it out. They're strike teams that go in and they help for something very, very specific. They pick up, they pack up, they move on to a different place, and they focus on something else. This is essentially, that's your Cracker Jack team of coaches. Someday, maybe we'll get there. Maybe if MTSS becomes a thing here, we'll be able to free some funds up to do that. From a coaching perspective, our coaches probably should have content coordinators that are experts in their field. Karen, in my opinion, deserves a team, someone who specializes in math, science, language arts, social studies, and even the performing arts, who then can work with the coaches very, very specifically. Not asking for that this year. We talked about the barriers we have to hit. That's not it. But here's one thing that we do know, is that our current coaching model, we've got some great coaches, and they do some great work. But for the most part, they only have to really coach folks that want to be coached. A lot of folks that are really good love to be coached. Some of my best players were my most coachable players in basketball when I coached college basketball. Some of the folks that really need to be coached might not really want to be coached because it's, A, it's hard, and B, it's humbling. When someone who's done that job for a long time tells you might want to shift your practice a little bit. We'd like to shift our practice as a district to create coaching cycles for small groups of all teachers, so everybody's getting coaching. Now, that's going to have to be a project that we work closely with the LEA with our association with, to make sure that we are honoring the terms of the collective bargaining agreement. But I can't imagine a district where folks don't want to get better. And if the coaching cycle becomes something that we're all going to do together, it shifts it from just one-on-one to maybe one, and I've got you 4 this week. And everyone's going to go through this. But when we have what we call congruency, all of our coaches in all of our buildings working on some very similar concepts together. Don't forget, SEL, we have that skill. MTSS, we're talking tier 1. Or skillful observation, we're talking neural downshifting, right? These are the things that all of our teachers are going to have to go through. So when we talk about meaningful PD, it's beyond those Wednesdays. It's in all that we do. It's in coaching cycles that everybody should have access to, not just the ones that say, I'll do it. Because oftentimes our folks that struggle the most are afraid to say they're struggling the most. So that's the immediate shift. It doesn't look too different. But someday when we're sitting here together and saying, yeah, so we deploy the ART out to blank, you'll be like, wow, and you'll know what I'm talking about. That didn't make our budget. It will never get to you because I know in my heart we're not ready for that yet. We have to cultivate a culture of educators that really want to be coached before we can create an ART. And when Bobby pointed out that's what Boston Public was doing, and of course I researched that, they had to take steps. It didn't just happen overnight. So that's how the coaching model will change. Everyone will have the access to it, not just the ones that want it.
Mr. Donovan, did you have a question? Mr. Donovan? Ms. Ray? I'll just go to Ms. Ray.
This is just setting off a different line of thinking that has nothing to do with this article, but now that we have the data coordinator, is she tracking what teachers are taking advantage of coaching and how that, what percentage of teachers are asking to be coached, getting what they need from it? I just would love a better understanding of that personally.
Yeah, that's a phenomenal question. So you've seen a lot of the work that Caitlin's done already in our continuance binder, and the reason why it's continuance is going to continue to grow for you. You're going to see it get bigger and bigger. There are 6 chapters to the eventual report that you're going to see. Now, in the continuous school improvement cycle, believe it or not, it's going to take 3 years to write those 6 chapters, and then it'll take 1 year after that. The work that you saw in that presentation came from that first question: where are we now? Who are we now? So we had to break that down. And for all of our schools, it's a vast undertaking to find out who are we really, right? By the time we get to the point of how do we do business, what are our processes? Those are different chapters of the CSIP that you are going to have. And then we continue to add on to that. But eventually, after our 3rd year and we're done and we said, how do we know if it worked, right? What should we standardize? What should we keep doing? Then you get the now what. And that now what is, ready for this? Who are we now? It starts all over again. Because you're looking at your successes and say, well, keep doing that, and looking at maybe your challenges and say, well, okay, we'll stop doing that. You only get better and better. And it's not a spike. It's a gradual but sustainable improvement. And that's why we brought Caitlin as someone to help track that and get our principals involved in that as well. But Alicia, what you will see sometime next year, which is really our section 2, so chapters 3 and 4 will be next year. That information will be in there for you as well. Processes, how's our coaching going? What do you think? What are you getting out of this? Because if you get nothing out of it, we need to change this.
Mr. Naaman? The ones that are here?
Sure.
Sure. Yeah. You want to invite them up?
Absolutely. Member Damon has asked for our principals and our assistant principals, who are currently here with us, to introduce themselves to the board and which school you're from. Jim, you're closest. You're a director, sir, yes. And directors.
Yeah,
I'd have to say it was pretty brief, and there was a lot of people, and I need a little bit of reinforcement there. Thank you very much. It's helpful.
So in Article 1, we have a really cool, and I don't want to like blow this for you, Todd. But it's a really cool something, and he's gonna do his presentation. Are you ready? Because I'm gonna get out of here. Okay.
And Impact Academy of Lewiston is an alternative to the alternative school model. So Chairperson Roy had said, you know, I don't like that word alternative. You know, there's definitely other ways to describe that. Alternative can be seen as a good thing if you have a good alternative, but in public schools, alternative seems as though, well, there's a negative connotation to that. So we'd like to offer an alternative to that, and we'll probably talk a little bit more about this when we talk about Article 7. But this is something that a lot of hardworking people in this room, my executive leadership team, Bobby is our new projects director at this point in time right now. She's phenomenal. But we've been working on this Impact Academy. Let me talk about this for a little bit. I think it's going to excite you too. We always start with our problem statement, and so here's a statement of our problem. We know Lewiston Public Schools must begin to more deeply access the potential of our physical space at the Longley School, our innovative human capital, and our technological capabilities in order to address the needs of students who seek or require a different pathway to achieving academic and social and emotional success. It doesn't seem like a horrible problem. We're kind of doing that right now, but we need to more deeply access that potential. So here's our current model. I'll start at the top, and I think that everyone's seeing what's down there at the bottom, but we kind of have three things going on at the same time right now over at the Longley School. And all three are doing something very important, and yet we're still not maximizing our potential. So we have this Longley Reentry Program that seeks to address the needs of students who have been removed from their school communities for disciplinary reasons. In the past, it was really literally to reenter off of an expulsion, yet we still have not had an expulsion this year, so business was a little slow at Longley Reentry. It became a place where students could voluntarily go rather than, you know, have a longer term suspension. And so it served a purpose, and it's okay. Great Falls Academy seeks to address the needs of students who, for reasons other than disciplinary, are not finding success in the traditional school setting. And Next Step High, we had a presentation from Next Step High. It's a partnership through a memorandum of understanding between Tree Street Youth and Lewiston Public Schools, providing academic and social and emotional instruction and real-world experiences for students. So how does Impact Academy help resolve that problem statement? Remember, the problem statements are off to the side, so you can refer to that. Impact Academy will provide a guaranteed, viable, research-based curriculum to prepare students. We're not talking about workbooks and worksheets and things that are stapled together. We're talking about guaranteed, viable, research-based curriculum. That's exciting. It's accessible credit recovery for students to get caught up. Remember that graduation rate. Jake's got that number in his head. Jake knows that of the 377 sophomores he has right now, if 34 were to just up and leave for no reason at all, he'd still graduate 90%. 34 is a big number of kids to lose. That's a huge number of kids to lose. And yet, we usually lose about 70 to 80 between their freshman and senior year. Where do they go? They're still our kids. What do we have for innovative options for them to get caught up before they fall so far behind that they can't catch up anymore? Impact Academy will allow for drop-in sort of a la carte services for students that know, I want to graduate on time, let me get that sophomore history that I didn't do so well out of the way. And of course, accessible acceleration options for students that just want to get ahead, or just want to get a course that's maybe not offered. It's not offered at the high school. I mean, how many students want to take Mandarin Chinese? Well, maybe I do. Where could I get that? And where could I get that for free? So how's it different than what we have right now? Well, a common mission, vision, and community of lifelong learners. The idea here is Next Steps is still going to be Next Steps. We're going to support Next Steps. They're doing great work there. We're going to support them more academically so we can make sure that their work that they're doing does translate through Department of Education standards. But in terms of the reentry and the Great Falls, to have a common mission, vision, and community of lifelong learners, very important, certified teachers in all core areas of instruction so that we know that our students are being taught and assessed and reported by teachers who are actually certified in that area. We don't want to be in a situation where we knowingly allow that to slip. Certified school counselor on site to provide planning and support. Social and emotional curriculum. We talked about CASEL. Here's the fun part. Service learning opportunities for all learners. So service learning is essentially what we heard a little bit from in terms of next steps. But this is a chance for our students for a large chunk of their day to work on something in the community. Goal-oriented, self-paced, blended learning opportunities for all. Continue partnerships with Tree Street Youth to provide and receive support from Lewiston Public Schools. And multiple opportunities for modeling of cutting-edge instruction practices, providing real-time professional development for LPS educators on site. Essentially, an innovation lab, model classrooms. This is a place where if you want to see how blended learning really works, come on down, check out what's going on here. If you truly want to be able to see what service learning projects look like, and you want to bring that back to the middle school or to the high school, come check it out. We're doing it right here. It's small. We're talking about, in year one, probably about 50 learners. So how does phase one of Impact Academy address our barriers of excellence, our barriers to excellence, I should say, with minimal impact on the budget? Well, first of all, we're not adding any additional teaching positions. You're not going to find that in your budget book. We're using our current resources to address our staffing needs because we have them. We seek to provide Edgenuity, which is a blended learning student management system that allows for personalized education to take place. You're going to find that in your budget book listed there at $50,000. That will allow us to have blended learning opportunities for the 50 learners there, but also learners who are at the regular middle school and the regular high school. If you think about what we pay for textbooks, that's pennies on the dollar. Now, these are licenses. Okay. These are licenses that can be accessed by hundreds of students. However, we want the Edge Academy, I'm sorry, not the Edge Academy, we want the Impact Academy to be able to be the place where our teachers can learn how to actually utilize the Edgenuity services. We know that we talked about our PD. We know that this is going to be a perfect place for our multi-tiered systems of support teaching to be applied at the Impact Academy. We know that our dyslexia training may be applied here because a lot of our students that are presenting with dyslexia could be very, very successful in this model. We know that our SEL training will be applied here. It's going to be based on SEL. And we know that our skillful observation and feedback, that's obviously the model that we're using right there as well. We will use our technology that we already have in Lewiston Public Schools. And we will be seeking support in Article 7 when we talk about that to talk about the administration there. So phase one of Impact addresses the barriers of excellence, to excellence, with minimal impact on our budget. So how could phase two potentially save the district money and raise revenue? We know that Lewiston Public Schools currently spends $4 million in outplaced services. With slow but intentional growth, we could potentially expand our programming to allow for in-house servicing of students who receive their services from organizations currently outside of Lewiston Public Schools. So for example, if we look at what we're paying for students to attend the Franklin School over in Auburn, we could do that right here. And we believe we could do it even better. In time, with appropriate measures and logistics in place, Impact Academy may become a viable option for learners from neighboring school systems, thereby generating revenue through the enrollment process. We have space, we have resources, and we have an innovative mindset. We don't want to start with that last block, not at all. We want to start with what we currently have and learn and grow together. But when all said and done, it could actually be a way and a means for us to be self-sustaining. If you look at districts such as Lisbon, who take in students from other districts, including RSU4, they do very, very well in terms of being able to sustain this with actually negative impact on the budget. In fact, it becomes a source of revenue. So here's what we're looking at. Your three different pathways: reentry, acceleration, and remediation and recovery. Three very different portraits, if you will, of students. The student that maybe, listen, we're going to need you to work on some SEL skills and some counseling. We still need you to access your curriculum. We've got certified teachers there. You may be there for a certain amount of time. You may choose to actually want to stay too. That's that piece of it. It serves that purpose. Right now, if we look at our students at Great Falls Academy, a lot of our students there present with very, very high anxiety, not wanting to be around 1,500 other learners. And they do well, and they actually accelerate in a smaller setting. We want to make sure that we maintain that as well, but also take that to the next level in terms of students that want to access courses that they just quite frankly can't access right now because of numbers. And we know that remediation and recovery would be a very innovative way for our students that didn't quite get it one semester, or maybe didn't quite get it 1 year, to be able to come in, whether it be before or whether it be after school, talking about an evening session, talking about even eventually serving dinner. It looks a whole lot like what you saw in Harlem. And of course, recovery as well. The absence of this right now, of this model right now, is contributing to our very low graduation rate. Would like to target grades 7 through 12 initially. So the print's a little small there, but the pictures will show you. So how would it work? How can a middle school learner access? Well, we get this up and running. Quality, quality, quality. We don't just do it as a program. This is quality. We do it when we are ready to do it. The 18-member design team has already been working on this all year long. Member Potvin has been very much involved in these meetings as well. But they would obviously make sure that they're enrolled in their school. They'll enroll in Impact Academy. And we know that we'd like 7th and 8th grade students to have options to do their regular 7th or 8th grade courses. Or what about the concept of early high school eventually, where they can take a high school physical science, a high school math, high school Spanish, maybe a high school PE and health, because we've got plenty of learners sitting at the middle school right now that actually can do a lot of high school work. So we hear a lot about early college models. What about an early high school model? That wouldn't be next year, but I'll bet you that would be within 2 years. Right now, we'll be looking at 8th grade students, 7th grade students that need a different place to go to school, a different place to learn. But again, with a validated, guaranteed curriculum and cutting edge instruction. That's where we're lacking right now. We also know that when it comes to sports and music and clubs and organizations, yes, you're part of your homeschool. Go do that. So for middle school, this is a great way for us to get our students ready for high school in a setting that's just non-traditional. And what about high school? High school becomes very, very interesting because you got some options here. Because of the proximity of the high school to Longley, you could have students that actually say, you know what, I want blended learning, but I also want my instruction in my regular school too. Okay, well then we schedule that. We can do a combination of that. We've got students doing dual enrollment with colleges and universities that still might want to do this as well. So many combinations of things we can provide for our high school learners that perhaps are outstanding students in language arts, but they just struggle with math. Or maybe there's even sometimes often you're very limited on your teacher match, that teacher conflict. We've all had those. And maybe it's just not a great teacher, but just not working out with me. Now you got some options as well. And so we'd like to be able to build the model out eventually so that, well, you've got your straight up blended learning, you've got your combo, or you even have dual enrollment as well. And of course, you're still on your sports teams and in your groups of music and your organizations as well. And at the end of the day, should we ever build it out to a point where we're allowing students from different districts to come in, if there are seats available, and go back and graduate after high school? It's a model that really could work, but not if we rush the model. We need to start small, start slow. Let's get our feet under us. Let's find out. We know the profile of the kiddo that goes there. What about this? What about the profile who can actually work there? Who can do this work? Who's going to engage kids and realize that actually you're really here for social and emotional learning, and we're going to do this too along the way. Or you know what? My schedule, because we are a different kind of school, I start a little bit later, but I'm also here till 6 o'clock. So you can come down from the high school and knock that course out that you're trying to knock out too. And you see that number of 34 kids that might disappear dwindle down. We look at every single student that is currently failing 1 or 2 classes in our high school. And we find out what are we doing for them so they can recover that. Because we're going to have to pay the piper eventually. You don't want to be that senior that has to take that freshman class over again. And sometimes that happens too. Impact Academy will be more than just a place where students who got in trouble go to, or students that just have a hard time functioning in a regular high school can go to. It actually becomes a solution to a lot of our problems. And again, outside of paying for our Edgenuity online learning license, that again can be used in our middle school and in our high school as well, not just at Impact Academy, we'll be looking at the administrator, who actually technically is assigned to Longley right now in the first place. So something we'll talk about in Article 7. But in terms of needing instructors, we're not going to be asking for any more teachers. We already have the building. If possible, we did have a group just come back from Arizona that just went out to a Arizona Model Schools conference. And we've got almost all of them here. Karen, would you, I know Sue's sick today, but Karen, would you take your team up and talk about what you learned so that our committee knows a little bit more about what this tool could do for us? Edgenuity is the tool. Did you not like it?
So Jake, Jana, myself, and Sue Williams, who unfortunately is home ill this evening, had the opportunity to go to an Edgenuity Summit. And at that summit, meet several people from the Edgenuity company themselves, as well as other districts that use this tool. And probably the best sessions that I attended were listening to those other schools share how they're using it. And many of those schools many of those districts use this tool in much of the same way that Mr. Finn talked about, for some credit recovery, for pieces where students can get some coursework in a different fashion. One of the things that they talked a lot about was having folks available to provide support for students, so not just having this online tool where kids sit in front of a computer and do coursework, but having someone there to help students not only manage the software and the coursework, but also do some reteaching, which is part of that blended learning piece, which I think is an important piece for us to all understand, because it's not just about sticking a kid in front of a computer. It's about when some kids can do that and be successful because there is some tools built in, but really it's most successful when they have the opportunity to engage with the coursework within the software, and then the teacher needs to be there to gauge whether they're moving at the right pace, they need some reteaching, and that human connection to be able to do some of that work and allow a student to then go back and do what they need to do. I'll let Jana and Jake share, who, by the way, were both interviewed for a spot on a video with Edgenuity on the work that they're doing, so you'll give them a shout out for that. But I'll let them share what they learned, and as well as maybe some of the experiences you have already using it.
So I think my two sort of biggest takeaways from the conference was, one, like how they kind of called it the Sunday night solution for the intervention piece, like My Path, and just talking about how it's really difficult to differentiate for such a wide spectrum of learners. And so we were really trying to target other school districts that had pretty diverse populations as well. You know, I just think about, like, on average, one of our math classes, 25 kids, and you have kids ranging from like a third grade level to some as, you know, Superintendent Finn was saying that could be ready for 9th or 10th grade. And with these, some of the programming that Edgenuity has, it takes their NWEA scores and it aligns sort of the curriculum with it. So if you're missing, you know, some foundational gaps in, say, 4th grade math, students can go on and do that. And so it's nearly impossible for a teacher to be able to access all of those different spans of gaps the kids are missing. So you could still have your direct instruction, but then when the kids had independent work time, they could access that. So that was really, really interesting. And then the other piece as well is just the option, like we were talking about, for students at the middle school. You know, we have probably 15 20 students, or even just getting into the building is a huge challenge for them, because a building of 800 students just does not work. It doesn't work for a lot of people, but their anxiety is just so high. But academically, they're on track, and so it just provides another option for them to be able to access academics without actually having to like either come into the building, or if they came into our building, they could have an alternative setting that didn't mean they had to like switch classes every time the bell rang, and navigate sort of all of the issues that any school in a district of that size has. So whether it's at LMS or at Impact Academy or any of the districts, it's a really nice alternative pathway for kids that still allows them access to grade level standards. So
Janet, can you talk just a little? You have a bunch of learners at Lewiston Middle School that are currently accessing Edgenuity through some of the licenses that we were able to acquire this year. Can you talk about how whether it's been successful, whether it's not been successful, and how that's been a difference for our students there, and how you might project that onto a grander scale?
okay. I mean, we have a variety. We have a couple students who literally or physically can't come in the building right now, some for medical concerns, a few others just because of anxiety. And so they're doing things like accessing the curriculum online and then coming in at the end of the day, like from 2 to 3, to meet with their teachers just to get some of the reteaching that they need. We have a handful of students that work with one of our ed techs. Again, if it's for math and science, and they're doing the online learning, and then they're actually in the building so they can go see the teachers when they need to for reteaching. But for a couple of the kiddos, their attendance was pretty much non-existent until we sort of provided this opportunity for them. And then we have some students that are not on it all day. They might just be on it for a couple of their classes for one reason or another. I mean, there's one student, it's just sort of like a conflict with the class in general, whether it be the teacher or students, and it's a nice alternative option to have. And to the students, ironically, are about moving at a pace faster than grade level, which I wouldn't have been able to provide otherwise for them.
I'll talk about where some students are currently using it connected to LHS. We are using it as a range from students who are using the MyPath, which is similar to what Jana was talking about in like our long lead reentry program. Trying to connect to that MTSS model, that social emotional support. So there's SEL modules built into Edgenuity, so we have some students experimenting with those. They also have the connected to MTSS. When students don't get it, they act out, to keep it really super simple. So students who are struggling to behave in the high school, we're exploring how they're doing in these classes to learn where they are in a zone where they're comfortable but still being challenged, and to see how that might translate down the road. We may not know for a year how that will translate, but students are taking the classes, they are making progress. We're also using it as a credit recovery model, and this is a different side of Edgenuity. It's a side that I really like. We have lots of kids who fail the class for whatever reason, but they achieved lots of standards. They were familiar or knowledgeable about lots of things, and some of these things from years ago. So they've taken a more complex class successfully, and they're looking up and they're a junior or senior in high school, but yet they failed this thing as a freshman. So they actually know all the stuff, but they have to recover the course. In the credit recovery model, it allows you to pre-test based on very specific objectives that are specific to the course and appropriate standards. And if students are successful pre-testing, they don't have to do that module. And it moves through the entire course. I can tell you this, the courses are rigorous. When I pull up, say, English Language Arts 10, you can scroll the thing and see the learning and all the different units that happens. It tells you how many hours. A lot of courses are between 75 and 175 hours to take. If you pace them properly as a student, you can't skip ahead. There's some safeguards for academic honesty. I do believe in it as a blended model. I don't think kids are motivated enough to do it just on their own. Most of them, some of them are, but very few. I like the blended model. We're seeing some success. To echo what Jana said, I know we have at least one student who cannot come to school right now medically, who is taking the course, several courses. We have students who have disciplinary concerns who are showing some success. But right now I have a lot of seniors who are seeing June and they're self-motivated, be very successful with courses that they failed prior and able to demonstrate their knowledge. And when we have conversations with them, they're able to say the things that they're learning. So I'm buying into it. I really like it. I was cautious at first because I believe in the blended model, but I didn't want to go too electronic. This does that. And I could do this for an hour, but I won't. One other thing, I got excited the other day talking with Rob about kids who take classes who, and we've talked about this for 10 years, I think, kids who take LRTC programs and they do this much math, but they really need this much more to call it a credit. I think this is a tool that Rob and I could sit with instructors and say, okay, what's covered? How do we assess that? What's missing? How do we give them that? And Edgenuity would allow us to close those gaps, customize courses, identify the missing objectives, and say to a student, if you do this, we will issue you that math credit. And that's been a missing link, I think, for a long time that I'm excited about.
Jake, so we know that, well, we know that there's components to a course that actually there's an instructor. There's a video of a very engaging instructor that does direct instruction for the kids. And you know, if you didn't get it, you get to rewind and put those headphones on if you want to, and not be that kid that had to ask 3 times, just rewind a couple of times and say, okay, I got that now. The graphics are incredible. Then there's a guided practice where they walk you through the practice, and then there's an independent practice. And the best part is the little formative assessment at the end. Now, what if in every one of our classrooms eventually, our teachers are able to adopt this as part of a station rotation? So I'm giving you that 20 minutes of direct instruction, and we're not going to break out into our Edgenuity groups. We're going to work in groups, put your headphones on, you'll get that. But now you get to bring your teacher home with you too. So now you can actually work with your mom and dad on this too. You can work with your parents on this. It translates into 42 different languages.
I forget the number of languages. One piece I should have mentioned, we have a student right now who needing a government credit and a few other things. We have a map for the student to be successful, probably for August graduation to be realistic, who is really struggling with the direct instruction in government. And so right now she's taking an Edgenuity course and the entire transcript is in Arabic, which she is fluent in.
So we talked about the other night how our kids are absolutely brilliant. And if you put me in Mogadishu and sent me to school, where would I be? Hey, you guys will be calling me Dr. Finn here pretty soon, but not there. So our kids are incredibly bright, and now we can meet them where they are. That's what we're supposed to be doing, right? And we're realizing how smart they really are, and we're moving them forward as well. In terms of rigor, you had mentioned that this is tough. It is hard. I was introduced to this when I was in Atlanta, and I was very skeptical at first. However, APS was far ahead of where I came from in North Carolina, and what we saw there was our teachers realized that, hold on a second now, I'm not going to burn out because the assessments are built in. They're doing the assessments, which means I'm not grading on Sunday night anymore, right? And now I can differentiate because the software tells me these 6 kids need work on number 3, so that's my group. You 6 guys, number 3, let's go over this, whatever that concept might be. For students that want to work ahead, when you're done, move on to the next module. It paces you as well. If we could put human support in a classroom that can actually do this work, how many teachers and ed techs would we need in every classroom? What do you think?
I think it's a loaded question because I don't know who the kids are, but I think that when Janet mentioned the Sunday night solution, it wasn't about teachers not working as hard as they currently do. It was about saying, okay, let me pull the report from last week and see where kids are struggling for exactly that purpose. How do I then implement the greatest instruction I can without me having to grade and then having to create a spreadsheet and then have to disaggregate the data? It's available to them. And the pacing model helps as well. So you can see kids are behind, where they're behind. There's lots of logs. I could, again, go on for hours, but some of the logs will tell you how long kids are spending on which activities and what their scores are. So again, it can be indicative of kids are moving through this really easily, or kids are struggling, or kids are able to get it, but it takes this much time. So that's a place where I can jump in and do some more instruction that might help move it forward.
So my final comment would be that there's a vision for what we could actually become as a school district, and you're not going to see it in the budget. And Bobby will tell you that initially, yeah, there it was. I wanted site licenses for every single school because I know how to do this, but I'm not them. And I can't do, I shouldn't be doing that. So when I'm talking about our true instructional leaders, our principals, they need a place where they can look at how is it being implemented. And the Impact Academy gives us the opportunity for our principals to say, I'm going to pop in during third block today. How are you doing this? And then, of course, they know that they have access to implementing this in classrooms or perhaps through an entire freshman wing to start building our capacity. What we don't want to have happen is, well, we all still have nightmares about PBL. I have it from 3 different states now. If we roll something out too quickly, it becomes a mandate, it becomes an initiative, just another thing. We want to make people thirsty for this. The Impact Academy offers us a small place where we can train our teachers how to become blended learning instructors and facilitators, train our students to fall in love with learning again, and realize it's okay to get things wrong and just go back and fix it, and truly talk about what personalized learning really is. And hopefully this becomes the example that then spills into our middle, into our high schools, not to mention the fact that there are elementary modules too. And some of our elementary principals have expressed interest in, hey, we could really use this as well. Not in this year's budget. We want to start small and hopefully become something that you'll see in future budgets, replacing things like textbooks, replacing things like periodicals. But what about this? What about when our teachers can finally breathe a little bit? We're going to see those stress-related absences come down a little bit as well. We'd like to be able to link everything that we talked about tonight back to those 3 goals. So providing meaningful, intentional, sustainable PD, this is going to help us with that. Address equity in the opportunity gap, this shatters the opportunity gap. Again, a lot of folks talk about the achievement gap. We want to talk about the opportunity gap. Give them the opportunity and they'll actually achieve. Our young lady who's taking the module now in Arabic. And providing improved instruction through SEL. There are modules built into that. And MTSS, that's universal across LPS. Our current budget that we're looking at, we talked so much about tonight, addresses this in this really small, neat little place that doesn't exist yet, and yet it does. That's not going to require more teaching positions. It just retools what those teachers do. I believe it's going to attract a different type of instructor, and I believe that this will do what it did for us in Henry County, Georgia. It will really become its own school someday, literally its own school. It'll become the example. And I'll wrap up by saying this. We've talked a lot about Lewiston Listens. It's about time that Lewiston leads. And we can actually be the leaders in the state. We'll be the only ones doing this in the state of Maine. And doing it well.
Okay, so I'll take questions, but I did want to say I'm investigating this tool myself as for my credit recovery students in adult education, but they are high school students. We use Odysseyware right now, and the kids are bored, and it's very text heavy, and so we're looking for something else. And so because this was mentioned here, I looked at the demo. It really is a different model and I like the blended learning. I'm with Jake. Like, these are students that need extra support mostly anyway, so having somebody there is important to match the technology. But if you've got a kid who needs chemistry and one who needs geography and one who needs algebra 2, that's really hard to do to make sure that they get what they need. The video in there, the thing that's different is that you do have to watch the lesson before you can do the activities. You can't skip through. You can't just go to the multiple choice question quiz and go on. So I do like the platform. I was going to ask, did you get the package that includes the social emotional learning modules? Because that seemed pretty stellar, and I hadn't seen that anywhere else. And having the access for students who are having challenges coming to school is super important. My question then is, you talked about Impact Academy having students who can come until 6 o'clock at night, but not hiring new teachers. So how does that work within our contract language? And you may not be hiring for those positions, then how are you paying for those extra hours with the same people?
That's a great question. So when we look at a lot of the things that are barriers that we can actually resolve for free just by thinking about it, oftentimes I'll ask our principals, what's preventing you from becoming the instructional leader that I know you can be, that you don't even think you can be? And oftentimes it comes back to schedules and structures. And we know that we can control schedules and structures. We can invent that. And of course we know that with our close relationship with our LEA president who's here this evening, when it comes down to, can we do this? Allison's in my office, I'm in her office more than you'd imagine. It's important that if we look at contractual hours in a day, that if we could ever imagine what it might be like to say, we'd like this open till 6, so can this particular teacher start at a certain time and work till this time? Can we stagger a schedule to have this open and available without infringing upon the contractual rights of that teacher? You'd have to want to do it. At the same time, though, hours-wise, what's the difference between 8 and 3 and 10 and 5? It would be something that we would like to build out towards in year 1. Probably wouldn't quite see that, but it would also be a close conversation with the association and with the teachers as well to make sure that we're not asking folks to do things that they don't want to do, nor is it any different than what their co-workers may be doing. I've always worked, other than Vermont, I've always worked in right-to-work states, and it was easy for turnaround principals to say, here's what we're going to do. And so we're going to run three concurrent schedules, and we'll be open till 9 if we have to. We don't have that flexibility here, but I do think we have the desire to start thinking outside the box and doing things differently, but also making sure that when we do so, that we're in alignment with the expectations of the contracts that we've agreed to. So that's certainly something to sit down and talk about, but I'm excited about that. I'm excited about the teachers that have come up to me knowing that we're going to be talking about this and saying, hey, would you consider me? I'd kind of like to do that kind of thing. And we're going to get to the point where we start building that, we talked about it earlier, that profile of what's the Impact Academy educator? What is that? What is that going to require of you? And how is this reinventing school? So lots of great things, but the foundation's there. There's a decent plan now. We meet every month, and when I say we meet, oh my gosh, so we have people from tech, from nutrition. We've got folks from pretty much every department here that are around the table that have really come up with this to this point. And now it's kind of the fun part, the design, the recruiting, what could we make this? And I think that Jake, Jana, and Karen will tell you that folks that were at that summit, and I've been to that summit before too, that's why I wanted them to go, will tell you that the hardest thing is how do we get a building? We got that. Can we use this to address that problem statement, which is go deeper into addressing these kids' needs? So the hardest stuff is really out of the way. Now it's the fun part for me, obviously, and for my team is design. And with the logistics people, with the curriculum people, and with the big picture people on board, we can really make this happen, but we don't want to rush it. I imagine sometime next year that our board chair says, yeah, I want the impact kids up here. Tell me how it's going. And let them pull up Edgenuity and show you what they're doing. Or say, you know what? I do a little bit of Edge, but I do a lot more with my teacher because I formed a great bond here. There's a great relationship as well. I didn't get to explain this slide. It's pretty self-explanatory, but as I thought about what would a decent, that's an awesome logo, by the way, but a decent motto might be engage, inspire, and revolutionize the learning experience. I got that revolutionized from Jake the other day because as we were meeting at Longley, actually, the group of us, Jake said to me, Jake, I'm going to quote you, okay? He said, this is my A-wing in 3 years. So essentially he said, we're going to do this in our school in 3 years. This is what we're going to be doing. And so I thought that's revolutionary. And you know what? We talk about innovation and define innovation. Well, so what do we currently have that we can do something better with that we can actually sustain over time? That's actually very cost effective. That's innovation. So just to highlight all certified staff, research-based practices, project-based learning, which is huge, non-traditional pathways, not alternative, non-traditional pathways, SEL-driven, online courses, traditional courses, blended learning, and personalized learning, goal-driven, differentiated instruction, and the whole learner approach. If we can get it right there, we can change the game there. We can change the game in Lewiston long term, but we have to be strategic and tactical about how we do it, not rush the process. I think that we have an idea here that we can really go with.
Sparks, you have a question?
I think Jake touched on it briefly, but I just wanted to confirm that students involved in Impact Academy would still be able to participate in LRTC.
In fact, we actually talked about this. It actually could really benefit, not that Rob has a recruiting problem at LRTC, it's pretty much a waiting list, but obviously folks who are currently at LRTC could certainly access this. Could you imagine if we get to the point where we feel as though let's have a second team and maybe have some folks from the outside come in it may very well attract folks to our LRTC program as well. And again, not that Rob's got an issue with that. So certainly open for all kinds of learners, and it's just very inclusive. The idea is very inclusive. We'd like to be that place where they fly in from San Diego to come see us. And you know what? Why not us? And because it's something that the district's already invested in all the pieces for the most part already, it's just a matter of getting our heads together. Everyone here is a superhero, so put your superpowers together. How can we make this better? At the end of the day, how would I have done there? I'd have done a lot better, I think. I think a lot of us would have too.
So when it comes to online learning, obviously a lot of things to be excited about. I wanted to ask what impact this is going to have on students learning to be better writers, because that's something that, at least at first glance, would seem like a really hard thing to do online, to evaluate online. So I guess I'm wondering what the impact for that is.
So one of the things we learned very early on, and then again at the summit, students have to submit writing pieces that get scored by live people, and then feedback is provided, so they submit assignments. So it's not all, when I say blended, it's truly blended. You need an adult to be participating in the process. So there are writing components that do have, ironically, they have syllabi and scoring rubrics that come with the courses, so teachers can even reference them for the assignments and modify them as they wish.
And this is precisely why I would not recommend this as a standalone option, although there are some parents that travel a lot. We had a young lady when I was in Vermont that's going to be on the Olympic equestrian team. And so I'm really proud of her, but she did most of her school in Florida while she was down there training when we were, in the snow. But one thing I can say is that the blended learning model, especially when you actually have, I'm going to say it again, all certified teachers. It's really important. There's some awesome people who are great mentors. We want to make sure we have certified teachers that have gone through the process that actually can grade. There are lots of writing prompts, but they're actually relevant writing prompts. And that's, by the way, where you see the SEL component come in, because they have a very crafty way of getting self-management into some of those prompts as well. And that's where you see that relationship being built. So when we talk about, hey, listen, I got my online module done, now I can sit down with you or sit down with a group of folks so we can do a little writing workshop as well. What we saw from a data perspective, I can tell you, is that our folks that utilized the blended learning modules that we had at Hampton High School outperformed our students that just had the live teaching. And that really prompted a lot of our traditional teachers to say, can I adopt some of this in my classroom as well? And so there was some good data there, and I'd love to be able to provide our school committee with no names, but with data as to, well, how are our kids doing? Next year. Our kids that took Edgenuity, how'd they do? And we could definitely hash that out. So great question, but great answer, Jake. I remember those days of those teachers still having to sit down and do the writing workshops as well.
So that pretty much concludes, unless unless you have additional. Okay.
So back to Article 5, I apologize, I didn't realize this before, but instructional technology and other was not addressed in that piece?
So it was addressed, but we didn't talk about what's in there. So if you have specific questions, we can have Dave come up. All right.
So all of these, Fiber Project, Core Switches, Destiny Resource Manager, Performance Matter software, SIS management software, are those renewals? Are those new?
Yep, let me tell you about, let's take them one at a time. So let's go with the fiber project first. We have a great opportunity using E-rate funding to be able to connect to the city's fiber run. Right now, the city is doing a fiber run all the way around the city itself. And they're actually going to have redundancy so that if there's a break in that fiber line, we just change, it's called the G-bits, you just change them around and immediately the data starts transferring back the other way. So you're not down and somebody goes and fixes that break in the fiber line and everybody's still up and running, which is kind of neat, and you just switch it back around. So the beauty is that's at 10 gigabits per second. That's really fast. That's really nice stuff. So for some of the examples we're talking about, to go with all of our students on programs like Ingenuity and so forth, and having the correct bandwidth to be able to do that, and also future-proof us to make sure that as new challenges come up with technology, we're ready to go. This is what this fiber project will let us do. And the key with the fiber project is, I think in there you can check the number. It's like $101 something thousand. Is it? Am I close? Okay, so it's in there. But we, through E-rate funding, get 90% of that back when later on afterwards, when we put in the project's done, we put in the proper paperwork because we've already been pre-approved, and we will get 90% of that back. So for a little over $10,000, we will have connected all of our schools to that 10 gigabyte per second fiber run from the city. It's an opportunity, quite honestly, it's an opportunity that I think we really shouldn't pass up on.
I just wanted to make sure, so this whole line is what, $570,000, and so I was trying to figure out if any part of it should be
Sure.
bonded out, because it sounds like a lot of capital.
Yep. But the nice part is, like I said, it comes down to $10,000. The other piece in the new core switch is actually a piece of that pie. In other words, we have a very used core switch that we get from the city as a hand-me-down, and it doesn't have enough modules in it to actually attach all of that fiber to. So we put a new core switch in to make that all work the way it should.
The resource manager, is that a software or is that a person?
No, it's actually software. Destiny is the software we use for our libraries and have for a considerable amount of time now to track books and so forth. The beauty of the Destiny Resource Manager is it will let us track virtually almost anything we want to track. So for an example, you can use it to track some of the school kits that go down to the elementary level, where we have teachers that come and go and so forth, and we want to keep track of where those kits are, because those kits can be fairly expensive to buy, so we don't want to lose them. So we can track them that way. It could even be used, if Jason Fuller decided he wanted to use it to track athletic equipment at the high school, it could be used to track athletic equipment. It could be used to track technology equipment as well, if we wanted to use it for that purpose. So it's one of those things that once we get in there and start working with it with different areas, whether it's down at the elementary level or athletics or technology and so forth, we might actually be able to save some money along the way, because we're actually tracking things better and being able to make sure we collect them from people and so forth. So it's got some real possibilities.
And then my only other thing that I don't know what it is, a Microsoft Device Cal.
Okay, yes, not many people do. When it's part of licensing with servers, you have to have, for each device that you're going to connect to your service, you got to have a Microsoft licensing cal, which allows you, basically you're saying it's a license to use to connect it to the server. So every once in a while, we have to go through and we have X number that we have to renew of those Microsoft licensing cals. And the other big piece that's in there, it's in Article 5 actually, is the Microsoft Office licenses. We are due October 13th, maybe 2020. Office 2010, which we've been using for a decade, is now no longer supported with security patches and such. So we're due to upgrade that. And then the other one is Office 2011, which we're using with our Macs. And right now, that one already does not, you can't upgrade your MacBook Air and use that, or you're going to have issues. So we're at the point where we have to do something with that as well. So that's why that's in the budget. Is that?
I do want to add to the E-rate discussion, there is an offset of revenue. So in the expenditure budget, you're going to see that expense that's driving that $500,000. And I think you're right, it was about $100 grand. There's an offset in the revenue budget under miscellaneous revenue for that E-rate reimbursement that we're going to receive. So you'll look underneath your revenue page, and you'll see miscellaneous revenue of $140,000. Part of that 140 is that E-rate reimbursement.
That's it. Thank you.
I want to just thank Bobby and for everyone for coming tonight. But Bobby led this. I do love the suggestion from the school committee. Let's let the experts be experts here. And Bobby led tonight, and there'll be a night that Pam does. There'll be a night that Karen does as well. I also am just very, very proud of our staff and those that stepped up to the microphone tonight. And thank you to the committee for allowing us to do it this way.